Well, folks, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Beautiful morning here on Long Island, New York, and this is Gene Panasenko on Straight and Unfiltered. I have a great guest today, Alan Clark, who is a commercial and advertising photographer. He's based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Great place to be at. Alan has been consistently rated as one of the best photographers in the U.S. His work can be seen on music packaging, magazines, and countless celebrity and Fortune 500 company websites. His client list really lists who is who in the world, from President George H. Bush to President George W. Bush to some distinguished people like Ethan Hawke, Peyton Manning, Nicole Kidman, Sir Elton John, James Earl Jones, and Dale Earnhardt. This is to name just a very, very few for the sake of time. But I'm truly excited to introduce to you folks,
what a mix.
Mr. Alan Clark. Alan,
Hey,
welcome to the channel.
How are you?
Great to see you. Doing well, doing well. How is the weather down in Nashville, Tennessee?
If you could see it, it's dark and cloudy, and it's going to rain at any moment, which could be cool because you're going to get to see it behind us.
I hear you. Well, it's nice and sunny outside, but it's pretty chilly. I mean, this morning it was 34 degrees. I don't know who is talking about the global warming. In New York at this time of the year, it's supposed to be so much nicer. Everything is supposed to be blooming.
Unless the glacier broke off and it's just sitting outside you know what I mean? It's just outside in the lake near you right now.
It has been drifting, yeah, it has been drifting towards here. But, some of the patches of ice snow, I mean, mountains of snow, as you know, they're being collected by the snow plows. I mean, but in some massive parking lots, they still have mountains of snow in spite of, few days of relative warm weather. But I mean, we still have, those patches of snow, ice snow sitting all over the place.
We got that this year. That was this parking lot behind me over here. This is my office and studio. This parking lot behind us over here actually had, you can't see it, but like right here and here and here were just massive piles. It was the first time we've had that in probably 20 years, maybe. Like we don't get that down here very often.
I totally agree. I have some very good friends and clients all across the South, Tennessee, including, look, I mean, forget about Tennessee. You guys, you're up north, from the places like Texas, like Arizona. Those guys, they've been pummeled with the snowstorms. It's just absolutely incredible and crazy. And when you think of the fact that those states, they're not equipped, they don't have like,
we have no practice. Everyone always makes fun of us because we don't know how to drive in it. I'm like, well, you get training every year. We don't. It's like there are maybe sometimes the last time it snowed at all was 2016. So it just happens every 5 or 6 years. So we don't get that opportunity. Like not up north. No way.
Hopefully it's a massive aberration and you guys will not have to deal with this anytime in the near future.
I hope not.
Especially at that scale. But Alan, truly a pleasure having you on the channel. So look, I mean, a lot of people, they have the dreams, they have the talks, but very few people can get anywhere close to what you have been able to accomplish in your, 30-year plus professional career as an accomplished, photographer. I would like you to take us all the way back to, your childhood. Were you born actually with a camera in your hand? I mean, how did you get?
Almost. It's not too far after that. I mean, I was probably, my mother it's so funny. God bless her. She could not take a photo to save her life. I mean, she could do it sometimes, but like if you were taking family photos, there was always a thumb in the photo. It was always like that. And for the longest time, we just thought we had like a bald uncle that was in the family. No, that was her thumb just over here in the corner somewhere. And so it was constantly, or if she wasn't doing that, she was tilting. Everything was this way. It was always a wreck. She just could not get everything lined up. And I noticed a great
visual. I felt like I'm in the cockpit of it.
And that's how she shot photos. That's how she photographed things. And I looked one time, I remember looking once when I was a kid, and she just had mitts, just claws, over the camera lens, just like this. And I was like, no wonder she can't take a photo. So we made so much fun of her. She eventually, around, I think I was probably 7 or 8, maybe 9, she handed the camera off to me. And, in some of my pages, I'll just say, once I picked up a camera, it just made sense. And that's kind of how this happened. I don't know why, but I didn't even wait for it to, is this working or not? I had no idea. I didn't care. I just started photographing things. I was obsessed with Hollywood when I was a kid. So it was stunts and it was this and it was that. And I just really, really loved Hollywood. And so with me and my friends in the backyard, I would take the camera and then I would just create these moments, as if we were the stuntmen. We were the ones doing the action and the fighting. And I remember specifically having a photograph of me jumping. It looked like I was jumping onto the porch. What I did was I jumped off the porch backwards, and put my hands up like this and my feet were level. And it just looks like I'm jumping straight off the ground. And so I just created these little vignettes, with my friends. And I did this forever. If I had a magic show in the backyard, it was being photographed. And so there was always a camera just kind of following my life around at that point, but it was me doing it. It was no one else in charge of it. So I just kind of kept thinking that's the way it should be. And that's the way it's been ever since.
That's pretty fascinating. I was just thinking of your mom, putting the thumb and then just screwing up so many shots. I remember clearly the days with regular analog cameras where they allow you 35 shots per roll. So when you think that every shot counts and matters, I mean, unlike nowadays, you just whip out that smartphone, whatever it is, Samsung, the iPhone, and you pretty much have unlimited number of takes on. So
I tell students, newcomers when they're starting out, because they're so worried. Everyone is so worried, and everybody listening to this, everyone's like, well, I'm not a photographer. And everyone's so worried about making mistakes that these cameras are made for mistakes. They're literally made. If you just get in there and mix it up, makes tons of mistakes, and then you're going to learn something, because you learn more from mistakes than you do from successes, I think, sometimes.
So true. But so you basically started using the camera at the right age of 8-9 years old. And what was the evolution? How did it get to the level to be a professional
the first step,
really make a living out of it?
The first step was, I remember the next step with my mom, funny enough, I made a just conscious decision, because I was like, this is just an Instamatic camera. I can't remember. We had all the little, consumer cameras back then, and it was the disc camera or the Instamatic camera. And we had all those. And I finally realized I've got to get a real professional camera. I got a job at a grocery store when I was 15 before I was supposed to, part-time. And we went and, saved up my money, just like everybody does. They save up their money, and I went and bought a professional camera. It was a Minolta XG9 at the time, and saved up every bit of money I made from the grocery store. And then that was that first progression, that first big step. And it seems like there's always something like that, because I can remember the next big step for me was just saying, this is what I do. And that was like in my early 20s. I was in the music industry, actually.
It really shows a commitment, as you said. Hey, you got a job at the age of 15, where a lot of people, they would just rely on the parents' handouts. But you knew, hey, this is something where you develop some interest. This is something that potentially, probably at that time, when you were still a teenager, you would like to make a living off. And you just committed yourself. You got the job, and not only have you made the money, but you actually had the discipline of saving that money, because you had the goal, you had the objective, and you've been moving towards that objective. And to me, it's one of the most important things. My main line of business, obviously, is financial advisory. I've been doing this for the last 25 years. And I'll never forget the experience of speaking with one of the seasoned, really very mature financial advisors, whose son was just about my age, and he just got in the industry. But this gentleman was telling me, hey, if you think that I made him an offer to join my practice, it's not the case, because he needs to really earn his stripes working for somebody unbiased, who is going to give him no slack. And if I see that he is committed in overcoming all those obstacles, moving towards his objectives and goals, then after a couple of years, I will consider, I will not guarantee, but I will consider giving him a shot to join my practice. So I think it's really, when you have a desire, when you have that passion, I mean, it's critically important in how successful you will become down the line, as a professional. So that's an interesting example you gave. Yeah.
It was. And to me, I think you're right. I think it's just the commitment itself. I think back then I had a lot of drive. I didn't, but you know what? And a lot of us are this way. You have drive, but you really don't have the end goal in mind. You have no picture of that. You have no context for it. So also built into that, you don't know all the mistakes and the things that are going to keep you from being the best. And so, that's an advantage, actually. I think that's more of an advantage than a disadvantage.
It is a
if you
huge
knew, if you
advantage
knew,
because you set your goals high.
yep,
A
yep.
lot of people, again, they say, hey, I would like to become a photographer. And they end up wasting years, if not decades, of their lives. They can't call it careers, their lives taking pictures of kitties, and puppies, and flowers in their backyard. Well, God bless you. If
Yeah.
that's something that keeps you happy, again, knock yourself and enjoy it and pacify your mind and your soul. But there is no way that it can be called a profession, a business. But you set up your goals pretty high, as you stated, and you knew that that's what it takes to get there. So yeah, interesting.
You know what's interesting? I worked at a photo lab. One of my last jobs before I did this full time, I was probably I think early 20s. One of my last jobs that I ever did was at a photo lab, and I kept seeing, people would bring in photos, and my job was to literally print the photos. And my one of my good friends was on the enlarger, so he was printing enlargements. I was printing just the little 4x6s over here.
Yeah.
Day in and day out. You see a stream of consciousness that repeats itself again and again, and you see the same types of photos. So like you said, the kitties and stuff, I'm not kidding. So it was down here we have a hot air balloon festival. A lot of areas do. This is kind of a common thing throughout the United States. So all the photos that came in, hot air balloon festival, cats, flowers with water droplets on them, and what was the other big thing? Just anyone near railroad tracks. So that was just something that you see a stream of consciousness repeat. So to honestly, to get outside of those things, you really have to make an effort. You got to think for yourself, because if not, you don't realize that you're repeating a lot of things that everyone else thinks of. Everyone thinks of that. Everyone thinks of doing those same types of photos, and you don't realize it until you see this happening day in, day out, just people bringing in the same photos over and over again. And so for you to make a conscious effort, based off of that, you really got to do something to step outside of that. It takes something like just a little bit more of a Herculean effort to push through that and to go on to something else,
Well, no pain, no gain. That's definitely the case. So at what point have you realized, Ellen, that that's something you want to make a profession? You want to make it your business because that's where your heart was, that's where your skills were, and that's what you were so passionate about. You mentioned at some point you were in the music industry. What was your affiliation?
Well, growing up in Nashville, all my friends' dads were famous musicians, session artists, or songwriters. Some of them like actual famous people, just actual famous musicians and stuff like that. So that was my world that I kind of grew up in. And I thought maybe I should do the same thing. I should be the same. I should do the same thing they were doing. And I tried a little bit. And everyone in Nashville generally knows how to play an instrument anyway.
I have no doubt.
Guitar.
It's almost by default. You're born into that environment, as you stated.
You're kind of, I can play drums, I can sing a little bit, you know what I mean? But there comes that point where you have to go, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'm great at. And so for me, that was kind of I kind of had to look at it pretty harshly and go, and also it did not burn in me just as hard as photography did. So started the music industry. Because of that, I started thinking, music business. I actually went into school for radio and TV broadcasting. And that was just how I did. I mean, I spent, I don't know, three or 4 years, and then became assistant music director at the college radio station that I was at. So I just thought that was my route. I love music. I love that. That was my route. And photography for me was a hobby at best at that point, because I didn't understand. I didn't want to be the guy that did the school photos and did, family photos and stuff like that for my whole life. I just was like, no, man, that doesn't appeal to me. I like music way too much. So I thought, I just didn't understand that I could make music. I hadn't quite got the grasp of like the different types of business you could be in. I think for a lot of us, we are only convinced that we can do these three things, these two things. That's it. You got choices. Your choices are, if you live in a small town in Hendersonville, Tennessee, that's where I grew up. That's actually where Taylor Swift grew up too. I'm much older than she is, so I was there first, but she, it's this small town, and you have this type of small town mentality. And so the biggest thing for me,
I have 1, 2, 3 choices. This is what my dad and mom used to do, and my grandparents used to do, and this is what my neighbors have been doing. So I'm going to follow the same path. Yeah.
Think bigger thoughts. that's the thing that I started doing, and I realized that was the thing that I had. I had no fear because I didn't know any better. I had a goal, which was I want to be whatever this is I'm going to be. I want it to be the biggest version of it, and I want to make my own path. And I just knew that staying in that small town, doing what I was supposed to do, doing what my parents did, just like you said, I didn't want to do that. So I knew that I was going to have to once again be bigger than this, be big, be bigger than myself, be bigger than or at least let my aspirations do the talking, because a lot of us just kind of like, hey, be quiet. And
Yeah.
we pushed that in the background, and it was just too loud. My dream was just too big and too loud. And I wanted it I wanted it to kind of drive this ship. And it's just really, really difficult sometimes to listen to that part of you and honestly be honest, because you know what's going to end up happening? You're going to come back there again anyway. You're going to spend your life doing the thing that you think you're supposed to do, and at some point you're going to either get burned out or you're just not going to be happy about it. And so that's the thing I decided. I don't know why I just decided that. I kept thinking, I'm going to end up here anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this now. And so I started music industry, and then as I was doing that, I started taking photos of my friends' bands and all that type of stuff. And eventually they were just like, Alan, you have to take money for this. You've got to do this, because I was doing it as favors and
Right.
trying to help them
Right.
out.
Just helping your friends. Yeah. But
Yeah.
eventually
Yeah.
you need to get compensated for,
Yeah.
for the services and expertise that basically been providing to those bands, and
I just kept thinking that, I'm not ready yet. I'm in the cocoon. I'm in the cocoon. I'm not
Right.
quite ready yet to fly. And they were saying, no, you're ready now. Because the results actually were what was happening, because I'd already spent 5, 6, 7 years shooting already. So I knew how to kind of line everything up, compose the photograph, put it in the right frame, in composition, and just like rule of thirds. I was already there. I didn't know. I think they realized I was there before I did. That's why I always say photography chose me first. And so that's kind of like how it was.
People see the difference. They see the talent, and they recognize the value that you've been able to bring to those folks. And I'm glad that they actually have been able to, to support you and convince you, if you will, that this is something you should select as your business going forward. But what was your main thing? How did you actually break into the world of the Fortune 500 companies? Because look, there is plenty of small town photographers, and they're doing here and there, but at the end of the day, they don't really do any huge projects. You ended up working with the Fortune 500 companies and the presidents and some of the biggest names in the entertainment business industry, like Elton John and what have you.
There you are.
Yeah.
Internets. Woo! It's our favorite.
But welcome back, though. So I was just asking you, how did you get your first big break to really start working with those Fortune 500 companies, Ellen, and the presidents, from George H. Bush, the senior, to George W. Bush, Sir Elton John. Some of the really mega names in the industry.
So, from just it being a hobby and to the point where I decided, okay, this is a career, I actually made a conscious effort to say, okay, here we go. I'm jumping in. And I jumped in. I was newly married at the time. She had a great, job, which allowed me a little bit of a cushion to make this leap. I had a little bit of a net. And
Right.
I think at that point I had just decided, man, I've tried everything else. I've tried sales. I've tried this. I've tried that, and I said, to make this jump, I'm just gonna jump. Like, I don't know what else to do. I'm not the guy that goes into the shallow end of the pool. I have to right off the diving board. So that's what I did. In the music industry, had already started a little bit into that career. I was an agent at the William Morris Agency, and that's a universal agency, talent agency that's mainly out of Beverly Hills. I think their first client in 1898 was Charlie Chaplin. So they've been around forever. And I worked in the Nashville office, and again with the friends, just taking the money and all this type of stuff.
Right.
Once that job ended, I just made that leap and I jumped in. I knew immediately that this is a great photo. People are looking at your portfolio, but I knew that if I didn't put someone in there that someone recognized, either as a celebrity or what have you, that they, it's almost like you have to qualify your work by people that you recognize. And so I knew that I was going to have to like put a celebrity in there. And so what I did was I went back to some of the same people that I had worked for as an agent, smaller artists, not really big, some of them session musicians and things like that. But I knew that if I added them to the book, at least the locals would know who they were. The locals would then hire me. And that's kind of how that started. I just said, well, I'm going to go back to the people that I've worked for, put them in the portfolio, and at least there's someone that someone recognizes in there, and they can see that I've got this and this. Oh, well, look at that. I know that person. And then I saw that and I kind of went, every time. So I kind of, as that started, I started adding the next biggest person, the next, celebrity, the regional famous person, the East Coast people know this person. Then all of a sudden you just keep adding that and adding that and adding that. And then what happens is, when the national, the international famous kind of come knocking because they see that you can handle a personality, that you can handle that attitude. And sometimes it's huge. You walk into the room sometimes with celebrity and you're going to know it because it's not tension, even though there is sometimes. It's really about just, that's a big personality. And when you hear someone say that, when they walk into the room, you feel it and you know it. And so I had early experience with that, having been an agent. Some of the most famous people in the world were coming in and I'm sitting in a conference room with them. Now, the job I had at the time was a much smaller job. I was either working audio visual stuff or then I was an agent in training and then I became an agent. But I understood that and I kind of was able to have that experience around it and had grown up with a little bit of it. So I had been familiar with it on a few times and I just knew that if I was going to do what I needed to do, I needed to scale this up as I went. And so every time I scaled up the star, I scaled up the celebrity, I would just add that one more person that was just a little bit bigger than the last person. It was a very small, but yet incremental add to my portfolio. And so it took a few years. The first big celebrity that I put into my portfolio was probably Dave Matthews of the Dave Matthews Band. And I think it's because at the time, I didn't have any work that was a big celebrity like that, but they liked what they saw. And I think what happened was they just couldn't find another photographer in the Southeast region to cover this. He wasn't ready by the time we were trying to shoot him in Nashville, I think originally, but he had come through on tour with a guy named Tim Reynolds. They were doing a thing called Live at Luther College. And so they kind of toured through Nashville. Things weren't lined up. They didn't know about it, so they weren't prepared for it. So when he went from here to Louisville, they asked me if I would join the tour and go there to shoot it. And I said, yeah, sure. And I got a chance to look at the theater. And man, the Palace Theater in Louisville is one of those old turn of the century theaters that was put out or made by the Paramount, movie company. And they made like 12 to 15 across the United States. And these things are like the Fox Theater in Atlanta. They're really, really beautiful, old, amazing. Like this one was Greco-Roman. It was, if you go look at it, it's incredible. 3 stories tall. He was blown away by it.
Taking your breath away. Yeah.
The ceiling was stars. Like they had put little lights into each, little optics type thing. And they built that into the ceiling. The ceiling was this azure blue. It was beautiful. And he was blown away by it. Not just me, but both of us. And so I was like, man, we're going to make this happen there. And it just turned out to be a great photo shoot. I was smart enough to separate he and this other guy because I was hired to shoot both of them together. Right. But I kept thinking, let's pull him over to the side. So I shot Tim first, and then Dave by himself. None of us knew this, but the following year, he had a solo record and they had no photos of him by himself. It was always with the band, always. And so I talk about lucky, right place at the right time. But you know what? I was ready. And one of the photos I'm going to send you so that we can put it in the show notes. It's the photo that just pushed everything over the top. When they looked for, these photos, they just kept buying this one photo and over and over again. Yeah. And what it was is he made this karate move in front of the camera. He just kind of went like this. And so he did that. And I don't know why it worked. But again, was prepared, had the camera up, aimed at him and was ready. Just like this moment.
And captured that moment. Yeah.
And the same thing with the moment itself. I just was lucky. I was the right person. I was there at the time. No one else was. And these were the only photos of him by himself. And I can't tell you, I probably made, 30, 40K off of these photos. Yeah. Because they resold. It was almost like, syndication, it
Yeah.
just went and went and went. It showed up everywhere. People magazine,
Circulated
Playboy.
all over, yeah, and that's how you start getting traction. But hey, God bless you. You kind of like spoke about your evolution. You earned your stripes. You started from the bottom. You learned a lot, and yeah, a lot of times it really depends on your luck. But most of the people, myself including, will agree that unless you have the skills and the attitude and the whole right package that it takes to step into those shoes when the moment is right, when you're being called, then again, nothing would have to happen anyway, and it would just go to waste. You definitely had all the prerequisites, you had the discipline, and you had the skills developed at that point. You've been shooting for a few years, and so yeah, that's an exciting success story. And once you establish yourself at certain level, then again, you immediately start getting traction because your previous works, they get circulated through multiple publications, and you probably start getting calls from other agents representing other, clients, being it, commercial clients, business clients or celebrities or politicians to that effect. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and you know what? It's never stopped. That same mentality of just kind of adding the next biggest person or situation or opportunity never quit. It still exists to this day. I'll move it and change it around a little bit, but if there's something that I want to do, for instance, I've been working on a personal project for 10 years or more that is photographing the famous spacesuits of NASA. So, actually, you know what? Let me back up. The famous spacesuits, period, because um, Yuri Gagarin is one of those spacesuits in that I had to add him as well, just because he was the first. He was the absolute first. And so photographed his spacesuit and, everybody else in the NASA program itself. And so that's been a personal project of mine. I can throw some of those into the show notes if you want to see them. But what I have left on that is Michael Collins and Armstrong. I went to the Smithsonian to photograph it, and they had taken it out to clean it for the 50th year anniversary, which was last year.
Right.
And so they had taken it out to clean it in DC, and it wasn't there. So I've gotten Buzz Aldrin's, at the time. So I was just like, I'll grab Buzz Aldrin's, but I'll come back. And you know what? I thought, having lived in, Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, as they want to say, Northern Europe, but Eastern Europe, really.
That's where you met your wife, right?
Well, her company was here in Nashville. We actually met here, but I would travel back and forth. Yeah, and I was like, it's still a 17-hour train ride from Estonia. So I was just like, I'll wait on that one. But that I wanted to get Michael Collins because we did a trade. The Americans did a trade with the Russians, and so we gave them Michael Collins' spacesuit, and they gave us Yuri Gagarin's spacesuit. And it was one of a couple, and it may have been his lining inside the spacesuit. Actually, they would not let that go out of Russia, but found out that they actually have two for Michael Collins as well. I think he had to change from one to another or something like that. I'm not real sure, but so I'm actually going to be able to do that here domestically and not have to go back to Moscow to do it. So, I've got a few left, but I've been working on this for 10 years, and I've got probably, I don't know, close to 15, 16 pieces for that, and then other little paraphernalia around it. So I've been working on that as a personal project, but every time it's always about scaling. I'm always thinking of the next move, always. I'm always thinking of the thing for myself, and I'm always thinking about the next move. I'm not just in the moment and, just the present. I'm always trying to think of, like, even when I'm shooting, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting. I'm always thinking of my surroundings. I'm always trying to be observant about what's happening. Not just a friend of mine told me once when I helped him with the NFL games, I would shoot the game, but he would say, turn it around and shoot what's watching the game, not just the game, but turn it around towards the audience too. That's kind of how you have to be.
The reaction, the reaction of the audience, of the people, the public.
You have to be observant about every single thing. Part of our job is to photograph moments, right? But the other part of it is just being observant about life itself. You have to be able to kind of look both behind you and in front of you.
Capture different aspects, to see the reaction of the public. No, that's fascinating. I really liked you mentioning NASA. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, which link we're going to also put in the description. And I believe it was the last interview you did was the gentleman on his direct experience with NASA. So I think it's pretty fascinating. I've learned a lot for myself, and I think it was just informative. I truly enjoyed it. So I hope that, again, the audience at some point, they will also check out your podcast as well.
Oh, thank you. It's interesting. I've tried to make it about what we do, but I've also tried to expand it. I want to expand this into entertainment, not just, at first, I think last year I was really concerned with trying to just have a photography podcast about, the highest that you could be inside this game. And it's true. I love doing that. And there's already been a National Geographic photographer on and NASA photographer on. But at the same time, I was like, I kind of feel like I needed to expand the conversation a little bit, because there are actors who are in front of cameras. Like, I've got a friend who's an actor, and she's now producing and making posts about exciting cameras that she's getting to work with. And so
Right.
I've started to expand, I think, this conversation to actors, writers, anybody that's an entrepreneur and or a creator of content, because there's something missing today with, it's not the generation. I think it's honestly a consciousness that's happening, period. You could blame it on the internet. You can blame it on whatever you want, but it's around this doing one thing well. And we had talked about this. You and I had talked about this
Yeah,
previously.
absolutely. So I would like you to really expand on that topic, Alan.
Sure.
So many people nowadays, I mean, they're trying to be, jacks of all trades, and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm a dental assistant, I'm a hygienist, I'm a real estate broker, but those are the other things I do. And some of them, they literally carry like 10, 6, 7 different cards, business cards. Now, obviously, I'm here in New York, and as you know, well, we have been the first place to be shut down as a result of this COVID-19 insanity.
Yeah.
But before, again, I would attend like 2, 3, sometimes 4 different networking events. And it's just amazing. You're seeing people, and they literally would carry like 4, 5, 6, 7 different business cards, completely different businesses, completely unrelated. So they're trying to be everything to everybody at the same time. And at the end of the day, they're not doing a good job with anything. So what I liked about your thinking, hey, focusing on just one line of business, perfect it, become a true professional, so you can really elevate yourself above the crowd, the rest of the competition that ends up not being a competition, because they just don't have that laser focus on the things like yourself. So I definitely would like you to speak about those kind of issues.
Well, the first thing I thought of was, where did this mentality come from? Why are we thinking this way? And I think it was, honestly, it was the first, few recessions that we had, starting in the early to mid 90s with the first Bush administration.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers a lot of the youngsters, a lot of the younger kids. They don't know that, for you, this is your first big depression / recession. For us, this is our third. And so, we've had to and it got bigger as it went too. So during the Obama administration was a pretty scary one, 2008, 2009, but this one's even more terrifying and even more world impactful. But for us, this is our third. So I think this came from that. We had to hustle. We had to change. We had to, we lost this job. Well, we got to get another one. We have to gain this skill. We have to learn whatever. We have to learn Photoshop. We have to do a lot of different things to be able to kind of survive in this situation. So that's kind of what this was. I think a lot of us had to, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Of all inventions, yeah. And I like bringing up an example. I had a chance to actually work with a lot of Chinese folks out there. I spent about 8 years with Hong Kong Shanghai Bancorp. So I've done some trips to that part of the world in the line of business. And what happens, one of the characters that means danger also has a second meaning, which is completely opposite. It means opportunity. So again, it really depends on, glass half full or half empty.
Yep.
So it's all about perceptions, and a lot of people, they're willing, and they do throw in the towels and saying, hey, I'm done, and I'm just not willing to take it any longer. Or a lot of people, they just suck it up and they pull themselves together and get up, and just keep going, keep pushing, because that's the mentality. You need to stay alive. You need to keep your business going. You have obligation to your clients. You have obligations to your family. Absolutely. And you just fight, you fight, you keep going, as opposed to really, rolling back and that's it, expecting, something miraculous to happen, which again, may not be happening in most cases. Yeah.
Well, and there's 2 or 3 agreements. You think that the first agreement is, I am going to be open-minded and see what else that I can do, what other skill set I can either learn or forcibly learn because I have to. But there's also another agreement that I think a lot of people don't recognize. And that is the agreement to also, because what ends up happening? You will pick up 1, 2, 3 skills, 4 skills, 5 skills. You start picking up these things as things change, as you start figuring things out for yourself, what I want to be, what I don't want to be. But we don't remember, here's the second agreement, to put some of these things down. So we pick them up but we don't put them down. So you gain this skill, you've gained the next skill, then you've gained the third skill, fourth. And then before you know it, like you said, if you read someone's Instagram handle, a lot of times it's, I'm this, I'm that, I'm an esthetician, I'm a dog mom, and you start adding real estate, and then you do all these things, and you don't realize this, but you're splitting up the pie. You are the pie, and you're splitting up the pie into small, tiny little fragments to the point that you're not serving whoever it is around you very well, because you've had to add these things because you've had to add these things. And when you start unselecting them, saying no, the power of no, putting this, because what ends up happening is these become 10 burdens that you're carrying. And what you need to do is to put some of these things down so that you can do a much better job on one or two things. And so, look at every hero that we've ever loved or we've admired. Picasso did one thing. Bob Dylan did one thing. Photographers that I've loved, chefs that you've loved. Everyone that's done this has decided to go all in on one thing. That's actually how you change something, because you have to put all the effort into one thing. And people are like, well, I like doing a couple of things. Fine. Do the couple of things. Do them when, like me, having the personal project with spacesuits. I'm not going to work for NASA. You know what I mean? But I am going to do this little personal project for me because I've loved them this whole time since I was a child. That doesn't mean I'm going to work for NASA. What it means, though, is that I love photography, and you can do different things inside of the thing that you love. That's fine. But you have to have that ability, to make the agreement with yourself to go, you know what, I do need to add something, a skill, but also the agreement to say, you know what, I need to put that down. Even though I like it, I need to put it down, and I need to go all in on this one thing. That to me is, I think, what has made me separate from the pack, has made me stay in this business for a long time, has made me successful, is because I decided to go all in and say no to a lot of other things, is having the power of saying no.
Well, and amen to that. I definitely give you all the credit for what you have done, Ellen. A lot of people, again, never mind staying in the business for years or decades, like in your case, they cannot even break ice and get into the business per se. You definitely have done it, not just being able to survive, but really getting accomplished so much more. Again, I can think of not many people in your line of business that would have roster of the clients of your level, again, from the presidents of the U.S. to, the knights, the Fortune 500 executives. Your works really have been printed, published, circulated worldwide. And again, you should be very proud of your accomplishments. One of the two lines that I know we spoke about before, you have on your roster, amongst dozens and hundreds of other distinguished characters and people and corporate entities, you have two presidents, you have two knights. One of them I mentioned, it's Elton John, and you're going to tell the audience the second one. And you have the ghost. So I really would like you to to touch upon that one. We have just about 7 minutes before we're going to start wrapping up. Yeah.
Sure. The second knight would be Sir George Martin, producer of all the Beatles records. Which when I'm usually asked, what's your favorite photo shoot, I always bring that one up, because the same, you have to look at it from the sense of the same guy that facilitated the Beatles facilitated me.
How much more iconic does it get? The Beatles, So let's just spend just a few minutes briefly, speak about your experience of working with.
Sure. Was hired. So at the time he was saying he was retiring, and he had to finish his career because his hearing loss. He had hearing loss from just working for years and years and years in the studio, going on the road. He went on the road with the band America, and from all of these things cumulatively, his hearing was just gone, and he had to take an exit from that and retire. It was finally time for him to do that. He made a record for MCA Records, I think at the time, just called In My Life, and I joined him in Cleveland, where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was, which I went to earlier in the day, and then we did the shoot later in the day with him. Spent probably 4 or 5, 6 hours with him, and it was fantastic just being able to work with this guy. But MCA Records was having a big press junket at the hotel, which I believe was the Ritz-Carlton. And so I got to do this photo shoot with him for Musician Magazine at the time. And it was just amazing, just being able to work with this guy. I would have an idea. Sometimes it was a dumb idea or a fun idea, but he was so game for all of these. Like I remember I wanted to put actual Beatles on his shirt, and I said, I want you to act like you're slapping them off. So there's a photo of him trying to slap them off of him. And so, and he was just so accommodating to me, just to try to help me with these ideas. And sometimes he liked them, sometimes he just did them because he may not even like the idea, but he was so facilitating that he actually went along with it and then tried to give me some feedback as well. So I was just like, good Lord, the guy that's facilitating the Beatles is facilitating. And I started thinking,
the guy who is the legend, an absolute legend. And he is so nice and friendly and receptive to your ideas, because you're trying to create again the image and portray it to the public. And he is just willing to work with you. As gazillion people out there forget about having the status of celebrities, the celebrity wannabes, but they're like the worst to work with. They have absolutely horrible attitude, just the way they act, it just makes it so much more complicated. And a lot of professionals probably would not even be willing to work with those kind of characters. But hey, God bless that man. He definitely is, he is the legend. So I'm glad that,
and he, like you said, what I've found, the higher the chain you go in a lot of these situations, whether it's working in, politics or it's music or whatever, or, Hollywood, the really, really uber professional people have really good attitudes and are very accommodating and very nice and stuff like that. It always seems like the ones that just aren't quite there yet have got this attitude, and they want to show up late, and they don't want to have a degree of professional. They want to make it about them, and that type of stuff. And so, that's how kindly I could speak to that man, because he was such an admirable man, being able to deal with all the stuff he had to deal with, and then smoothing out their rough edges. And believe it or not, because the Beatles really did have rough edges, he actually smoothed them out and made them kind of like, acceptable on a large scale, because a lot of the things they would bring in sometimes were really rough. You go back and you listen to the first, 16 versions of Strawberry Fields, John played that on guitar, and it was very pingy. It sounded metallic. The guitar wasn't great. He's the one that made the suggestion to switch it over to this keyboard called the Mellotron, and it had that real smooth, kind of feel to it. And that was his idea. Also his idea to write the strings for Eleanor Rigby. I mean, the guy just was amazing. He truly was the fifth Beatle, and that's always the photo shoot that I say is my favorite.
Fascinating. Before we go into the wrap up, Alan, just a few words, if you will. What was your experience of working with George H. Bush and George W. Bush Jr.? Just in a few words, if you will.
Absolutely. One of them was definitely the better politician. The dad was, was definitely the better politician. I remember being on the photo shoot, and we had everything set up. I had my assistants all kind of waiting. We were all dressed up in suits. All of the university, because it was a benefit for a university, and all the university presidents and all the dignitaries and everybody were kind of lined up on a staircase waiting for him to come in. He walked past all of them to me, and I just was like frozen. He goes, "Hi, I'm George H. Bush," and I just kind of looked at him. I was like, "I know who you are," and it was just amazing.
I've seen you on TV.
Yeah, I know, right? You've been a president. I know who you are. He walked straight to me and shook my hand, and I always heard that he was always very kind. I don't know, maybe he wanted to be a photographer. I don't know. But I've always heard great things, because he always treated the press staff and the pool of photographers very well. Dinners for them, and always treated them very well.
Yeah, recognizing what you guys do, the hard, the hard work he had to put in.
He understood something. I don't know what it was that he understood, but he understood how hard it was for us to have to be in both worlds, both outside and inside. That's a real thing, just being behind the curtain, but also in front of the curtain. And I think he got that. He could see the pressure that was on us, I think, or something like that. But his son was just a ball of energy. Everything you've seen Will Ferrell do about him, I love the guy, but it's true. It's just true. It's the way he talked. I remember he looked over at me at one point. He knew I'd photographed his mother, and he said, "How many photographs of Mama did you get?" And I just said 3. And he goes, "I thought so." And he started, when he laughed, he just looked at me and went, he did a little shoulder shake and stuff like that. And I couldn't help it. I just started laughing. It's exactly like Will Ferrell's imitation. So it's one of those rare cases where it was true. Like, people impersonating Elvis is so over exaggerated sometimes, but nope, this one was right on the mark.
Right there.
So yeah, it was right on the mark.
Alan, those are truly fascinating stories. I wish we had more time. We're trying to keep it within certain, time limits for the benefit of the audience, which needs to get back to making money to pay their bills. But thank 100%. You so very much. I truly appreciate your joining us. We're going to put all the contact information for yourself in the description box below the video. but I do want to state at least, again, your LinkedIn or whatever, the website name before we wrap it up for the day. Yep.
Yeah, just the website's just Alan Clark, and Alan is just Allen. So a lot of people always do the ALAN version, but it's ALLEN, Clark, no E. So AlanClarkPhotography.com. There's a page you can go to for the podcast, also a page for coaching and things like that. But also, I still work. People a lot of times will kind of stop one thing when they do the other, but I kind of keep all of them alive. I don't think I ever want to stop shooting, ever.
The beauty about your line of business, Ellen, you can be 80 years old, you can be 90 years old for all I care. Thank God we don't need to plow the land any longer, at least in our lines of business. So, with your level of expertise, and everything that you've been able to accumulate over years and decades of doing this for a living as a very successful, professional, again, God bless you, more power to you. Keep going. People, businesses, politicians,
never going to stop.
They need help from great professionals like yourself. So
they actually do.
They actually do. I mean, we recognize that, we know that. So hopefully for years and decades to come, you're going to be blessing your fans with great work. Again, we're going to have all the contact information for you in the description box for the audience to get in touch with you. And I would love to have you back down the line at some point to share more fascinating stories. I mean, you have such a wealth of great information to really share with us. And I do thank you for carving the time out of your very busy schedule to come and join us. All right, Ellen.
Absolutely.
So again, for the folks who have been watching us on YouTube and listening to us on all the podcast platforms, thank you so much for tuning in. Always a pleasure. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, that I do hope and pray you did, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and keep spreading the word. Send the links to your friends, your business associates. Let's keep this channel growing, and we'll keep doing the best to keep inviting more great and fascinating professionals like Alan Clark. So again, thank you so much for coming to join us. Stay well and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much.